Hello, my name is James. Welcome to my stream. Today I'm gonna see if I can create some sakura, some cherry blossoms. So if you haven't heard, we've just been asked to not go out looking at cherry blossoms this weekend, which is kind of like the end of the world for people who live in Tokyo. So I'm gonna see if I can make a digital recreation. Well, I don't think I'm going to get very far, but I'm going to spend 30 minutes on it. 30 minutes on it. So I'm going to start the same way I always do. I'm going to open up a new directory and create a HTML file. And I'm just going to see what I can come up with. So I hope you're doing well and washing your hands and staying safe and not heading out. When you don't need to, of course. Here we go. So, I've got my hello world, and so how do we make cherry blossoms with HTML? That's a good question. I've seen someone do it before. If you ever have the opportunity to be in Tokyo, there's a bar called the Hackers Bar, which if you go on a Friday night, you can ask the guy there, Hamabe-san, to create Hanami for you and sakura for you, and he'll do a great job. I'm trying to remember how he does it, and I have no idea, but I'm gonna just give it a shot and see where I can get. So, I'm gonna start by creating. Let's just call it a flower. And actually, let's set the body background color to a blue, because I'm going to make it the sky color. That's not a sky color. Okay, so what I want to do actually is I'm going to see if I can use... how am I going to pick my color? Well, I want it to be as kind of cyan. That's not a sky color either. Let me see if I can find some sort of tool that'll. Let me try one more thing. I think there's a tool in Visual Studio Code to let you pick colors. I thought there was, but there's not. So I'm gonna find a color picker on Google. Here we go. What's a nice sky color? Oh, I could check for like cherry blossoms, and I want this kind of color. So I can digital color meter. If you didn't know, there's this awesome app on macOS which lets you do this. So I can. That's the color I want. 197.228.246. So I can actually set the color using RGB, and that allows me to just copy that in. Of course, I've forgotten what it was now. 195.226.224. Wow. 195.226.224. So we have a sky. And now it's time to make some petals or flowers. I'm going to call it a petal because I think instead of trying to draw individual flowers, I'm just going to try and make cherry blossoms, petals scattering across the sky. It's not going to look that good. That probably sounds nicer than it's going to look. So, what color are cherry blossoms? Well, they're a kind of pinkish, whitish color. So I'm going to start by, well, actually, I better give it some width and some height. And I'm going to set it to white first. That's not the right color for cherry blossoms. So let me open up my image again, and I'm gonna steal some color codes from here. I think this is kind of what I think you'd expect. 253.225. 253.225. That's kind of cherry blossom color. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and make it not a circle, but I don't even know what to call the shape that I want to make it. Kind of like this it's kind of two semicircles which are squished together. I don't know if I can do that with a transform. I might need two divs actually per petal. So let's make, I know how to do this with two divs, so I'm just going to do it this way. If you know how to do it a better way, then let me know in the chat. I will keep my eyes on it, or attempt to. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make two sort of half circles and squish them both together. So what I will do is I'll do petal left, and when I put two dot class names after each other like this, this allows me to sort of nest the classes. So this will only be applied to divs to a left inside of a petal, basically. So I'm going to make this one 5 pixels and still 10 pixels in height, and I'm going to give this a border radius of whatever. I'm just going to try this and see what happens. Actually, I only want the border left, top left, and border top right. You can't just say border left. You have to specify. You have to specify it for the whole thing, or for individual corners. I'm going to pull this out, and I don't even think I need this. Okay, let's make this a little bit bigger. And what I want to do is I want to squish this a little bit, so I'm going to use a CSS transform for that. I'm going to use transform, and I think I can probably scale X. So I don't want to scale in both axes. I only want to scale it on the X axis, and let's just try squishing that to half its width. Okay. Okay. And let me try and make a right hand side. That's not right. I want, for the right hand side, I want to start by moving the rounding to the other side, and then I want to use positioning. So I'm going to position the whole petal absolutely, which means relative to the, in this case it means relative to the body element, which is, you can kind of imagine is wrapped around it, which it would be automatically if I didn't add it, but let me just add it in. So this is going to position the whole petal relative to the body, and then I want to position these individual petals absolutely inside of here as well. So I want to put this one left 15 pixels. Nope, because it's scaled. So maybe instead of having width 14, I want to actually have it as 15. I want to have it 14 so that I can scale it. Well, if you scale that, it's going to be to 0.5. That's basically squishing it to half the width. So now it's going to be 7. So I can position this one 7 pixels from the left and get this, which isn't perfectly a sakura petal, but it's a start. It's a start. You can kind of see this here. There's, I think, a little bit more squishiness on squishiness. That's the word I'm going to use. It's a little bit more squishiness on one side, but it's a start. So I don't know if you've ever been in, if you've ever seen this, it can kind of look a little bit like snow. You'll have lots of these petals just floating away. So what I'm thinking I want to do, but I'm not exactly sure just yet how to do it. How do I make it sort of like just float like this? So this is something I really don't know how I'm going to do this. I think probably the best way to do this is to make it follow a path, just one path, and then fade out, and then randomly add them using JavaScript to the screen and just make them follow a random path, a single curve, and fade out as they do. So let me see if I can figure out how to make one petal follow a curved path. That's a good start. So I don't know how to do that. I'm going to Google, which happens a lot in programming. Okay, so I'm going to search for CSS animation curved path. Moving along a curved path in CSS. Or animate object in curved path. I like Stack Overflow. It tends to have more to the point answers if you can find them. Okay, this looks like exactly what I want. Do we have a solution? Maybe... Do we have a solution? Not really. But transform origin, that's... I see. So yesterday, if you saw my fireworks, I was using transform origin to sort of rotate individual dots in the firework around like a center point. And so I could probably use the same effect, or the same mechanism here. So let me try that. So what I want to do is I want to animate the entire petal, not the inner sort of halves of it. So I'm going to start by adding animation. I'm going to make this duration 1 second, and I'm going to say ease out, which is the same one I used yesterday. And I am going to make it just called curve, because I can't, naming keyframes is hard. And then I'm going to add this keyframes declaration, so I'm going to tell it what kind of animation this curve is, and I think it's gonna rotate it. But also, so let me just start by rotating. Transform. Sorry. So 0%. This is the attributes we want to apply at the beginning, and this is the attributes we want to apply at the end, and then the browser will take care of interpolating between those. So we'll start by transforming, adding a rotate with 0 degrees, and at the end we'll, I don't know how much of that arc we want to do, say 30 degrees maybe. So, okay. And then I want to move the origin. So to do that, I need to set transform origin, which is the point at which that's going to rotate around. And I probably want to, for the moment, just put it down here somewhere. So maybe this will be an x-y pair. So the x is going to be 0. I want to transform it around here. So x 0 and y. Let's call it 100 pixels. See what happens. Okay. That's a start. But I think I want to make it. Okay, I feel like that's too fast. Let's just start. I want to add some change in the size as well. So I want to add a scale term to the transform. So let's scale it from, say, 1.5 times the size to, I don't know, 1. That didn't work. Oh, no, it kind of did. But this scale is being applied to... I wonder, I don't even know. If I put this scale before this, is this going to change anything? Probably not. Because the problem is that this scale is... Okay, so let me explain what's happening here. Is this transform origin is not just the origin of the rotation. It's not the point around which we rotate. It's also the point around which we scale this leaf. So what I'd really like to be able to do is apply 2 separate transforms to this. I'd like to be able to apply a rotation around an origin a long way from it, so you can kind of think of it as curving. And then I'd also be able to scale the leaf, the petal, and probably fade it in and fade it out, but I can put that on the same thing. And I'd also like to be able to rotate that as well, so it's like rotating on multiple different axes. And I can do transform rotate 3D, so that will give it, that'll allow me to scale it sort of into the page and out of the page. But I think I want to have 2 of these somehow. I want to, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to say petal. I'm just going to say inner. Because that'll allow me to do a rotate. I see what I want to be able to rotate around 2 different origins. I want to be able to rotate around the center of the petal, and I also want to be able to rotate around this point down here. So to do that, I'm going to need 2 elements, so I can set 2 different transform origins. So let's try this. Let's get rid of the scale for this one, and instead of calling this curve, I'm going to call this arc, because we're just moving it along an arc. And then on the inner one, I'm going to add this other rotation. I'm going to call this rotate. So I'm going to have to create the keyframes for rotate. This can be basically the same, actually. Funnily enough, I think I might be able to use the same animation, in the same keyframes. The only thing I'm changing is the origin. Yeah, okay. Funnily enough, now it doesn't rotate at all. That's really interesting. Okay, and I could probably do like rotate 3D and use that to, I don't know, how do you do rotate 3D? I've never used rotate 3D before, so I'm gonna avoid using that and just stick with what I know. I wasn't actually even, the reason I tried this is I wanted to add an opacity, a scale, isn't it? Didn't I? So scale from 1.5, because it's kind of like going up and then down. It feels too big. Then I want to, I'm going to change this background color. I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to change it to black or white, because I just feel like that's going to, looks like an almond now. So I don't know if you can see this, but there's like a black line in the middle here, and the reason that is there is because these transforms are often not perfect. There's often some kind of they're slightly off from pixel perfect. So I think it would be possible to fix this, but how am I going to do that? Maybe I could just set this to 6.5 pixels. Nope. Set it to 6. What does that look like? Okay, that fixes it. That looks fine. Okay, so I want to also add some opacity to this animation. I'm gonna fade it out as it drops. So I'm gonna start at 1 and I'm gonna set it, make it end up at 0. So you can see I can add multiple different transforms. I just separate them by a space. It says James and then it stops working. Opacity is not a transform, that's my problem. Scale and rotate are transforms. Opacity is a CSS attribute, and I have to set that as a separate part of the animation. So I want to fade it from 1 to 0. And what I can do is, instead of just making this interpolate from 0% to 100% and kind of have it instantly there, I can make this 10% and I can make it actually fade in, because you can have as many of these keyframes as you like. So I can set this to 0, and I can even this is going to look funny. But you can add a little bit of rotation in like different directions. You can do all sorts of stuff. Okay, so that's one So what I probably want to do is I want to set opacity to 0 as the default opacity, so that once it's faded out, it's gone. And okay, so that's one petal. Now I could add lots of petals manually, but I think what I would like to do is automatically add them using JavaScript and make them kind of, or make lots of them. I'm gonna make this change a bit, and no, I don't like this extra change. Okay, I didn't like it changing direction of rotation there. And okay, so I want to add lots of these programmatically using JavaScript. But before I do, the thing I want to do is I want to make sure I know how to position these in different spots. So this is petal 1, this is petal 2, and let me introduce something which I haven't done in the last videos. I'm going to use a style attribute for my div element. And style lets me set these CSS properties directly on the element, as opposed to having to set them on a class and a style, or a selector and a style tag. So I can do this to set top to say 50 pixels and left to like 200 pixels, or just any random numbers. Okay. So let me start then by let me continue by adding a script tag and adding some JavaScript. So what I want to do is, and I briefly showed this yesterday, is I want to add simple. Oh, sorry, let me see this question before I move on. Can you quickly explain position absolute versus position relative? Okay. So position absolute positions things relative to, everything is positioned relatively to something, but so I guess it's kind of like a really odd way to name it, because even position absolute is relative to the parent, which has a position attribute set, whereas position relative is relative to the previous the previous sibling. So let me see if I can show you this by, first I'll remove this animation, because I think it's going to be easier to demonstrate without the animation here. And let me remove opacity 0. So we've got these petals. And if I remove this, if I change position absolute to position relative, or actually let me first remove position at all. So this is the default behavior. You can see that I'll remove it from both of them. So you can see what happens is, by default, when it's position relative, the element, the second element, the right hand side one, is positioned on the far left of whatever box it's inside of, and immediately below the one above it. Now when you set an element to position relative, position absolute, that doesn't change by, okay, it does change. It positions it at the, no, it doesn't change, because sorry, I've got this left. That doesn't change by default, but let me show you what happens if I set this to position relative and set top to 0. It's still exactly the same place. Whereas if I set it to absolute and set top to 0, now it's going to be at the top. And you can see here that I've got position absolute here and position and no position set here. In fact, I could set this to relative and nothing would change, because, oh wow, I just closed Safari. That's who put the Q button on my keyboard is right next to W. Thanks, Apple. Let me just open this up again. Okay, I'm back. So for the first element in the left element is so for the first element that's a child of some other element, position relative is often going to be the same as position absolute because it's relative to the top left, whereas for the second one it starts to change. Sorry, I'm not sure that was a very good explanation, but there are better explanations on the internet, I'm sure. I hope that helps. If not, leave a comment and I'll try and figure out a better explanation in the next video. But okay, let me go back to the script tag then. So I want to add a script that adds these flowers, changes the rotation and changes the time of the animation and a bunch of other things, so that it's constantly flowers being added to the page and removed from the page. So I'm going to use how am I going to do this? Well, first I'm going to create a function. And a function is a chunk of code that you can repeatedly perform over and over again, basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add petal, which is, I guess it's calling the function is what you say. And I'm going to use the code that I briefly showed you yesterday to create an element. Const petal equals document.createElement, and basically create one of these and add it to the page. This sidebar is way too wide, isn't it? Okay, that's better. I'm going to create a div, then I'm going to set the div's class name to petal. Actually I need to create 4 divs, so how about I just create them all at once. And so this create element thing here is also a function, so it's defined the same way that I'm defining this. I'm not going to go too much into how this works today, but let me see if I can just get it to work first, and I might try to explain this better in another lesson once I've got it actually working. So we've got petal, we've got inner, we've got left, and we've got right. And you can see what I'm doing is each of these corresponds to one of these elements here, and I'm basically setting these attributes just in a different way. It's a different kind of syntax to do that. And then I have to build this up, so I can do petal inner dot append child petal left and petal right and petal outer dot append child petal inner. Okay, so I've got my petal. Then I'm going to do document.body.append child petal outer. So that should give me a petal, hopefully, if I remove this. Yeah. Okay, so I've got one. That's one function. Oh, I'm glad that helped. Okay, and I can pass what they're called as arguments to the function. So let me start by by specifying the left and the right. Actually, I'm gonna just pass a single options argument, or no, I'm gonna pass a style. Nah, I don't know what I'm gonna pass. I don't know what I'm gonna pass. I'm gonna start by passing options, and I can set the style on each individual petal. So the left equals options dot left. I can set the top equals options dot top, and then I have to actually pass these options in, and to do that I'm going to create what's called an object by using these braces, and I'll set, for example, 50 and 50, and hopefully that's going to move this petal over to the right. So now I can create a bunch of different petals, in different positions. I should actually make these different. Okay. Okay, we've got 4 petals. Now, these are all added at the same time, which is okay for the moment. What I probably want to do next is adjust the scale and the rotation of the whole thing. So, how am I going to do this? The problem is these keyframes, I'm not exactly sure how to set these from JavaScript. So, I know how to change the transform origin from JavaScript. So probably what I want to do is just get rid of this 0% and do it the opposite direction. Okay, and if I remove this completely and push this up here. Hey, okay, so now I can set the transform and the transform origin from the JavaScript down here, which makes it possible to change the parameters of that arc for each of the petals. How long have I been going? Wow, I've been going for 30 minutes. I'm having fun. I'm just going to keep going. So let me set the arc arc radius. So 300 is what I'm using, but I'm just going to add a bunch of different ones to see how they look. And then I can set the arc radius by doing petal outer.style.transform origin equals 0 options.arc radius plus pixels. So what I've done here is I've created a different, basically I've set this transform origin by using JavaScript. Now I can actually change the amount of rotation also by setting the transform. So arc, I don't know what you call that. What's the number of degrees that the arc is? This is arc angle. I don't know. It's too long since I've done this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna set a bunch of these as well and see how they all look. And the last thing I'm going to do before I sign off, assuming I can get this to work, is automatically add a bunch of these petals instead of manually adding them. So I want to set the transform to rotate, and then I want to set the arc angle, which I'm not sure is even the correct terminology, but it's okay. So let me start with add some smaller ones too. Okay. Now the last thing I want to do is I'm going to use set interval. And so this is an interesting function. This lets you call the same call a function over and over and over and over again at a specific interval. So by doing this, I'll be adding one petal. I'll be calling this function, and that's what this is, once every 500 seconds. So once every 500 milliseconds. So once every half a second. Here we go. So this is not that interesting. This is just going to add a new petal to the screen every 500 milliseconds. But it gets a whole lot more interesting when I change these parameters based on a random value. So if I want to get a random number between 0 and 1, I can call math.random, which is another built-in function. And I can set this somewhere between. Aha! This looks. I can set this between. Okay, almost here. Almost there. I can set this here. These two things let me find the width and the height of the entire area, and I can use that to, well, set the top and the left. I want to set overflow hidden on the body so I don't get these scroll bars added. Then I want to start adding a lot more of these. Okay, and I'm going to set this back to white. Now I'm going to leave it as black. Now I think it's going to look nicer if there's more of an arc. So I'm going to try changing this arc angle to give it a longer arc. Well, that seems okay to me for almost 40-ish minutes. So I'm going to leave it there for this stream. Thank you for watching. And I'm going to come back to this tomorrow and see if I can't explain some of what's happening in a little more detail. And maybe tweak the animation, but I think I'm going to try and spend a little bit of time explaining. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Bye. Good night.